There are moments that change a man's entire life. For Samuel Bridger, that moment came on a scorching August afternoon in 1885, when he saw a small figure lying motionless by the banks of the Gila River. In that instant, he had to choose between a past stained with blood and a future he could not yet imagine. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the desert floor. Sam rode slowly along the Gila River, his horse Dusty, moving with weary patience. The landscape stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of cracked earth and scattered mesquite. Sam's eyes scanned the horizon with practiced vigilance. At 34, his face bore the marks of hard-living deep lines, carved by years of squinting into the sun and bearing burdens too heavy for any man to carry alone. His beard, more salt than pepper, grew in patches along his jaw, unkempt and rough. His eyes, faded blue like worn denim, revealed the deepest truth. They were the eyes of a man who had witnessed too much death and carried too much guilt. 2 years had passed since fever took his wife Margaret and their son Thomas. He had buried them in the hard ground outside Silver Ridge, their graves marked by simple wooden crosses. The desert wind slowly wore away. Since then, Sam had drifted through the Arizona territory like a tumbleweed, taking odd jobs hunting bounties and breaking horses, never staying long enough to form attachments. He told himself he preferred the solitude. It was easier not to care, easier not to feel, easier not to risk losing anyone else. But on this particular afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, something caught his eye, a splash of color that did not belong, a small bundle of fabric near the water's edge, partially hidden by saltbush. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip as he urged Dusty forward. Out here, anything unusual could mean danger. Raiders sometimes left decoys to lure travelers into ambushes. But as he drew closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a child. A little girl no more than 6 or 7 years old lay crumpled on the riverbank like a discarded doll. Her small body was frighteningly still. She wore a traditional Apache dress, torn and dusty. Her long black hair was matted with dirt. Her bare feet were bloody from running over sharp rocks. But it was her face that struck Sam like a physical blow. Her skin had taken on an ashen grayish pallor. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Her small chest barely moved with shallow, irregular breaths. She was dying. For a heartbeat, Sam sat frozen in his saddle, memories flooding through him like a flash flood through a desert canyon. He saw his own son Thomas, 5 years old, laughing as he splashed in this very river on a summer day that now seemed like it belonged to a different lifetime. He saw Margaret calling them both in for supper, her smile bright as the Arizona sun. He saw Thomas's face, pale and fevered in those final terrible days, the light fading from his eyes as sickness claimed him, despite every prayer Sam had whispered into the darkness. The old Sam Bridger, the man from before the war and before the losses, would not have hesitated. But this Sam, this hollow shell of a man who had spent 2 years running from his own humanity, found himself paralyzed by a question that cut deeper than any blade. Could he do this? Could he let himself care again, even for a stranger's child, knowing how much it would hurt if he failed to save her? The answer came not from his head, but from somewhere deeper, from a part of himself he thought had died along with his family. His body moved before his mind could stop it. He swung down from Dusty with urgency he had not felt in years, his boots hitting the ground hard as he ran to the child's side. He dropped to his knees beside her, his weathered hand surprisingly gentle as he touched her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but weak, fluttering like a bird's wings beating against a window pane. Her skin burned with fever despite the chill of approaching evening. "Can I save her?" the question escaped his lips in a hoarse whisper. The child's eyes flickered open at the sound of his voice. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with a terror so profound it made Sam's heart clench. She tried to pull away from him, a tiny whimper of fear escaping her cracked lips, but she lacked the strength. Her small body trembled like a leaf in a storm. "Easy, little one," Sam said softly, keeping his voice low and calm. "You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you." The words felt strange in his mouth. How long had it been since he had spoken with kindness to another human being? He reached for his canteen, supporting the back of her head gently. "Small sips," he murmured. He tilted the canteen, letting a few drops touch her lips. At first she did not respond. Then her tongue darted out weakly. Her eyes glazed with the nearness of death, suddenly focused with desperate need. "Slow," Sam cautioned as she tried to lunge for the canteen. "Too much too fast will make you sick." He gave her a small mouthful, then pulled it away. While she swallowed, he retrieved hardtack bread from his saddlebag, crushed it between his fingers, and mixed it with water until it formed a soft paste. The girl watched with enormous eyes, still afraid, but beginning to understand this stranger meant no harm. When he offered the bread, she took it with trembling fingers and ate with small, desperate bites, her survival instinct overriding her fear. As she ate, Sam took stock of her condition. Beyond the dehydration and exposure, he could see scratches on her arms and legs, some fresh, some beginning to scab over. There was a small burn mark on her left hand, blistered and angry-looking. Someone had hurt this child. Someone had made her run. His jaw tightened. He knew that mark. He had seen burns like that before, made by the tip of a cigar pressed against flesh. It was the kind of casual cruelty certain men inflicted when they wanted to establish dominance, to break someone's will. The girl wore a bracelet on her right wrist, intricately braided leather adorned with small turquoise beads. It was beautiful work, the kind that spoke of love and care of a mother's hands creating something precious for her daughter. The turquoise caught the fading sunlight, glowing with inner fire. Sam felt a lump form in his throat. Somewhere this child had a mother. Somewhere a woman was probably going out of her mind with worry. The sun touched the horizon and the desert temperature began its rapid descent. Sam gathered mesquite branches and built a fire. In the desert, fire was not luxury, but necessity. The girl watched him with enormous eyes, some color returning to her cheeks. The fire caught small flames growing stronger. Sam spread his bedroll near the warmth and gently lifted the child, surprised at how light she was, how fragile. He wrapped her in his wool blanket, the one that still carried the faint scent of Margaret's lavender soap. He had kept it because parting with it felt like losing her again. Now, tucking it around this stranger's child, it felt right, like maybe Margaret would have wanted it this way. The girl curled into the blanket, her small body finally beginning to relax as warmth seeped into her bones. Sam sat beside her, keeping watch, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver. Whatever had happened to this child, whatever she had run from, might still be out there in the darkness. As stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear desert sky, Sam hummed a lullaby Margaret used to sing to Thomas. The melody was simple and sweet, speaking of safety and love and home. The girl's eyes shifted from the fire to Sam's face, and for the first time, he saw something other than fear. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just desperate hope that this strange man with the kind voice might actually keep her safe. Sam kept humming the music, filling the silence between them, building a bridge across the gulf of language and culture and experience that separated them. He was a white man, a former cavalry soldier, someone her people had every reason to fear and hate. She was Apache, part of a nation that had been driven from their lands, hunted, betrayed, and broken by men who looked like him. But in this moment, by this fire under these stars, they were simply two survivors finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The girl's breathing gradually slowed and deepened as sleep claimed her. Her small fingers, which had been clutching the edge of the blanket, relaxed. Her face, tight with pain and fear, smoothed into the peaceful expression of childhood innocence. Sam watched her sleep, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Not quite hope, but close. the first green shoot pushing through scorched earth. He fed the fire throughout the night, keeping watch. He did not sleep, could not afford to. But more than that, he did not want to. He wanted to stay present in this moment, to witness this small miracle of a child breathing alive, saved. When dawn broke over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the girl stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment confusion clouded her features as she took in her surroundings. Then she saw Sam still sitting exactly where he had been, and something in her small face softened. She sat up slowly, wincing at stiffness in her muscles. Sam had already started heating water over the fire and had pulled out more food from his supplies. Dried rabbit meat, more hardtack, strips of jerky. "Hungry?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Bet you could eat a horse." The girl did not understand his words, but she understood the gesture as he offered her the food. She took it hesitantly, and then, to Sam's absolute surprise and delight, her lips curved into a small smile. It transformed her face. Despite the dirt and exhaustion and lingering shadows of fear, that smile revealed the beautiful, spirited child she was meant to be. Sam felt his own mouth pulling into a grin in response, an expression that felt foreign on his face after so long. She ate more slowly this time, with less desperation, and Sam took this as a good sign. Her body was beginning to believe it would be fed again. As she ate, Sam dampened a cloth with warm water and offered it to her. She looked at it with uncertainty until he mimed wiping his own face. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she took the cloth, cleaning her face and hands with careful deliberation. When she finished, she looked at him and spoke for the first time, her voice small and hoarse. "Shima, Shima." Sam did not speak Apache, but he recognized the desperate longing in that single repeated word. Mother. She was asking for her mother. His heart ached for her, for the terror she must have felt, separated from her family in the vastness of this unforgiving land. He leaned forward, speaking slowly, hoping his tone would convey what his words could not. "Your mother, I'll help you find her." The girl searched his face, those dark eyes, reading something there that made her nod slightly. Trust, fragile and tentative, began to form between them. Sam stood and began breaking camp, his movements efficient from years of practice. As he worked, the girl watched him with intense curiosity. When he brought Dusty closer to the fire to saddle him, her eyes went wide with wonder. Dusty was a magnificent buckskin gelding, strong and loyal. Sam had owned him for 3 years, and the horse had become his only real companion. "Want to meet him?" Sam asked, leading Dusty closer. The girl stood on shaky legs, and Sam was there immediately, offering his arm for support. She took it without hesitation, and together they approached the horse, Dusty sensing the child's vulnerability with the uncanny awareness. Horses sometimes possess, lowered his great head, and blew softly through his nostrils, a gentle greeting. The girl reached out one small hand and touched Dusty's nose. The horse stood perfectly still, patient as a saint. Then the girl did something that made Sam's throat tighten with emotion. She laughed. It was a quiet sound, barely more than a giggle, but it was pure and genuine, and full of resilient joy that children somehow manage to maintain even in the darkest circumstances. The sound pierced straight through Sam's carefully constructed walls, reaching places in his heart he thought had turned to stone. In that moment, Sam Bridger made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would not simply help this child and walk away. He would not hand her over to the authorities in Silver Ridge, who would likely put her in an orphanage where Apache children were forced to forget their language and culture. He would not abandon her the way the world had abandoned him when he needed help most. No, he would do whatever it took to return her to her family, to her people. He would see her safely home, even if it meant riding into Apache territory, even if it meant facing the ghosts of his own past, even if it meant opening himself up to the possibility of caring about someone again and all the pain that might bring. "All right, little one," he said, lifting her gently onto Dusty's back. "Let's find your family." She settled into the saddle, her small hands gripping the pommel, and looked down at him with an expression that held both nervousness and excitement. Sam swung up behind her, his arms forming a protective circle as he took the reins. They rode north following the river, and the girl began to show signs of recognition. She pointed at a distinctive rock formation in the distance, a tower of red stone that rose from the desert floor like a sentinel. She made a gesture, tracing a circle in the air above it, and Sam understood. The sun. A mountain. These were landmarks. Home was somewhere ahead. As they traveled, Sam found himself talking to her, even though she could not understand his words. He told her about Dusty, about how he had won the horse in a card game from a man who did not deserve such a fine animal. He pointed out tracks of various animals: coyote, roadrunner, jackrabbit. He found himself wanting to teach her, to share knowledge, to be useful in a way he had not been since Thomas died. The girl listened intently, and though she did not speak, she began to communicate in other ways. She pointed at things, asking silent questions with her eyes. She mimicked the animal sounds Sam made, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, she began to lean back against him as they rode, trusting him to keep her safe. It was mid-afternoon when they found the first troubling sign. Sam spotted tracks crossing their path, and he immediately pulled Dusty to a halt. He dismounted carefully and crouched to examine them. Boot prints, multiple men, maybe 4 or 5, and the distinctive marks of wagon wheels, deep ruts in the sandy soil. These were not Apache tracks. Apache moved differently, lighter, leaving less evidence. These were white men, and they had been here recently, within the last day or two. Sam's mind raced. The girl looked at the tracks, and then at Sam, and he saw fear flash across her face. She knew these tracks. She recognized them. His jaw clenched as understanding crystallized. She had not simply wandered away from her family and gotten lost. Someone had taken her. These men, whoever they were, had taken her, and she had somehow managed to escape. The burn mark on her hand suddenly made horrible sense. They had hurt her, probably trying to intimidate her into silence about something, but she had been braver than they expected. She had fled into the desert despite the dangers, choosing the possibility of dying alone under the sun over whatever fate awaited her with her captors. Sam knelt down until he was at eye level with the girl. He looked into her eyes and spoke with quiet intensity. "Someone took you, didn't they?" She did not understand the words, but she understood the question in his eyes, the gentle concern in his face. Slowly she nodded, and a single tear traced a clean line down her dusty cheek. "Not anymore," Sam said, and this time he made it a promise, the first real promise he had made since standing over 2 fresh graves and swearing he would never let himself be vulnerable again. "I promise." The girl studied his face for a long moment, reading something there that satisfied whatever test she had been conducting. Then, in a gesture that nearly broke Sam's heart, she reached out and wrapped her small arms around his neck, hugging him with all the strength in her tiny body. Sam's arms came up automatically, holding her close, and he felt something shift inside himself, like ice breaking up on a river in spring. For the first time in 2 years, Samuel Bridger allowed himself to feel, to care, to hope, and it terrified him even as it felt like coming home. They continued north as the sun climbed higher. The landscape began to change subtly, the flat desert giving way to gentle rises and the first distant suggestion of mountains. Sam knew they were approaching Apache territory, the White Mountain Reservation that the government had grudgingly carved out for the tribe after decades of warfare and betrayal. As they crested a low hill, the girl suddenly sat up straight in the saddle, pointing excitedly ahead. Sam followed her gaze and saw a thin column of smoke rising in the distance, the telltale sign of cooking fires. A settlement, her home. But even as relief washed through him, Sam felt the weight of what was coming. He was a white man, a former cavalry soldier riding into Apache territory. His presence would not be welcome. There would be questions, suspicions, possibly hostility. The Apache had every reason to distrust men who looked like him, who wore the scars of military service, who came from the culture that had stolen their lands and slaughtered their people. The girl seemed to sense his hesitation. She turned in the saddle and looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw something that gave him courage. Faith. She believed he would keep her safe, that he would see this through. How could he do any less? "All right then," Sam said, urging Dusty forward. "Let's get you home." They rode toward the smoke, toward the unknown, toward a destiny that neither of them could have predicted. Behind them, the sun continued its relentless journey across the sky. Ahead of them, in the gathering shadows of approaching evening, a small Apache village waited, unaware that a stranger was about to ride into their midst, carrying their missing daughter. And farther still, unseen and deadly men with dark intentions tracked their progress, determined to silence the only witness to their crimes before she could speak the truth that would destroy them. The Apache village of White Mountain sat nestled in a shallow valley where the foothills began their climb toward the Superstition Mountains. 40 wickiups, traditional dome-shaped dwellings covered in brush and hides, stood arranged in loose clusters around a central fire pit. Women worked outside their homes, grinding corn on metates, weaving baskets with practiced fingers, tending to the daily rhythms of life that had sustained their people for generations. Children played near the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the settlement, their laughter carrying on the warm afternoon breeze. But as Sam rode Dusty down the gentle slope toward the village, that laughter died. One of the children spotted them first, a boy of perhaps 10 years, and his shout of alarm brought the entire settlement to instant alertness. Women gathered their young ones and hurried toward the wickiups. Men emerged from various tasks, some carrying rifles, others with bows, already strung arrows nocked and ready. Sam kept his hands visible on the reins, making no move toward his weapon. The girl in front of him was squirming with excitement now, calling out in Apache, her voice high and urgent. Sam could not understand the words, but he heard the joy in them, the relief, the desperate need to be recognized. 4 warriors moved forward to intercept them, forming a defensive line about 50 yards from the village center. They were young men, strong and capable, their faces painted with the ochre and charcoal patterns that spoke of readiness for conflict. Their eyes held the hardness of men who had learned not to trust, who had seen too many broken treaties and too much betrayal. One of them, taller than the others, with a scar running down his left cheek, raised his rifle and shouted something in Apache. His voice carried the unmistakable tone of command of warning. Sam pulled Dusty to a halt and slowly, very slowly, raised one hand in a gesture of peace. With his other arm, he helped the girl slide down from the saddle. The moment her feet touched the ground, she was running. Her small legs churned across the dusty earth as she raced toward the warriors, crying out words that tumbled over each other in her urgency. The warrior with the scar lowered his rifle slightly, confusion replacing some of the hostility in his face. He called out to her, his voice sharp with question. The girl reached them and grabbed the warrior's free hand, tugging on it, pointing back at Sam, speaking so rapidly that even if Sam had understood Apache, he doubted he could have followed. She was gesticulating wildly, touching her own throat, then pointing at Sam, then making eating motions with her hands. Sam remained perfectly still atop Dusty, watching, waiting, knowing that any sudden movement could end with a bullet or an arrow finding its mark. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained calm. He had learned in the cavalry that showing fear was often more dangerous than the actual threat. A commotion arose from deeper in the village. People were moving aside, creating a path, and through it came a woman running at full speed. She wore a traditional dress of deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and her long black hair streamed behind her as she ran. Even from a distance, Sam could see the resemblance to the child. Same high cheekbones, same determined set to the jaw, same graceful movements despite the desperate urgency. "Nita," The woman's cry split the air like a knife, raw with emotion that transcended language. "Nita!" The girl spun toward the sound of her mother's voice and screamed in response, a sound of pure relief and joy and love. They collided in the middle of the clearing, the woman dropping to her knees and crushing the child against her chest, her body racked with sobs. She was speaking rapidly in Apache, her hands running over Nita's face, her hair, her arms checking for injuries, reassuring herself that her daughter was real and whole and alive. Sam watched this reunion and felt his own eyes burning. He understood this scene in his bones. He had dreamed of such a moment with Thomas, had prayed for it, had bargained with God for it. But his prayers had gone unanswered. Watching this mother find her child felt like witnessing a miracle, even as it twisted the knife of his own loss deeper into his heart. The woman looked up from her daughter, her eyes finding Sam across the distance. They were dark and fierce, filled with a mother's protective fury and suspicion. She said something to the warriors, never taking her gaze from Sam. The warrior with the scar responded, gesturing toward Nita, clearly asking questions. Nita pulled away from her mother just enough to speak, pointing at Sam, touching the bracelet on her wrist, making those eating motions again. She was explaining, Sam realized. She was telling them he had fed her, given her water, kept her safe. The woman rose slowly to her feet, keeping one hand on Nita's shoulder, as if afraid the child might vanish if she let go. She spoke to the warriors again, and this time her voice carried a different quality. Still cautious, still wary, but no longer quite so hostile. She began walking towards Sam, the warriors flanking her, and Nita trotted alongside, holding her mother's hand. As they approached, Sam could see the woman more clearly. She was perhaps 29, her face beautiful in the strong, dignified way of Apache women who had endured hardship and emerged unbroken. There were lines of grief around her eyes and mouth, the marks of someone who had known loss. Her hands, he noticed, were calloused from work, but also graceful, the hands of someone who created as well as labored. She stopped about 10 feet from Dusty and studied Sam with an intensity that felt like being examined down to his soul. Her gaze took in his worn cavalry jacket, the service revolver at his hip, the scars visible on his hands and face. She was cataloging him, reading his history in the physical evidence his body carried. When she finally spoke, it was in English, heavily accented but clear. "You feed my daughter." Her voice was deeper than he expected, rich and musical, despite the edge of steel running through it. This was not a woman to be trifled with, Sam understood immediately. This was a woman who had survived, who had fought, who would kill to protect what was hers. "Yes, ma'am," Sam said, keeping his voice respectful, his posture non-threatening. "Found her by the Gila River. She was in bad shape. Dehydrated, starving. I gave her what I had." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You soldier, cavalry." It was not a question. She had recognized the signs as clearly as he had read hers. Sam corrected gently. "Not anymore. Left the service 2 years ago." "Why you help?" The question was direct, cutting through any possibility of evasion. "Why you not take to fort to agency?" Sam met her gaze steadily. "Because she deserves better than that. Because those places, they don't see children like her as human. They see problems to be solved, Indians to be civilized." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I've seen what happens in those places. I couldn't do that to her." Something flickered in the woman's eyes. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. She turned to Nita and asked her something in Apache. The girl responded eagerly, her hands gesturing rapidly as she spoke, touching her own lips, her stomach pointing at Sam's canteen and saddlebags. The woman listened intently, occasionally asking what sounded like clarifying questions. Nita's responses grew more animated, and at one point she ran to Sam's side and grabbed his hand, tugging him slightly as if to prove he was real and safe. When the child finished, the woman stood silent for a long moment. The warriors waited, their weapons still ready, but no longer quite so threatening. The entire village seemed to be holding its breath, watching this strange tableau unfold. Finally the woman spoke again, and this time her voice carried a weight that made Sam's spine straighten instinctively. This was not casual conversation. This was something formal, something important. "My name Ayanna. This daughter Nita. You save her life." "Just did what anyone should do, ma'am," Sam said. Ayanna shook her head sharply. "No, not just. You feed her your bread. You give water when she die of thirst. You share your life with her." She paused, and when she continued, her voice had taken on an almost ceremonial quality. "Our people have law, old law from ancestors. When stranger feed our child saved from death, that stranger become family. This is ilta, sacred bond." Sam felt his stomach drop. "I'm not sure I understand." "You feed my daughter when she need. This mean you care for her life like your own. By law of my people, you now belong to our family." Ayanna's dark eyes bored into his. "You can refuse, walk away. But this insult the spirits. Insult the bond you already make when you choose to save, not ignore." The warrior with the scar said something in Apache, his tone skeptical. Ayanna responded sharply, gesturing toward Nita, toward Sam. An argument seemed to be brewing, but Ayanna cut it off with a slashing gesture and a stream of words that carried unmistakable authority. Sam's mind reeled. A family. She was saying he had become part of their family through his actions. The anthropological part of his brain, the part that had read accounts of Apache customs during his cavalry days, recognized this as legitimate. The Apache took bonds of obligation seriously, especially those involving children and food. To share one's food with a starving child was to acknowledge kinship, to accept responsibility. But the emotional part of him, the part that had sworn never to let himself care again, that had built walls around his heart, to protect against the agony of loss, that part was screaming at him to refuse to ride away, to return to the safe numbness of solitude. He looked down at Nita, who was watching him with those enormous dark eyes. She had one hand on his stirrup now, as if anchoring herself to him. She was smiling a hesitant, hopeful smile that cut through every defense he possessed. Sam thought of Thomas. He thought of Margaret. He thought of the long, empty years since their deaths, years spent drifting like a ghost through the world of the living. He thought of last night by the fire of the moment when he had felt something crack open in his chest, of the green shoot pushing through scorched earth. Dusty stood still as Sam swung down, every movement measured and calm. When his feet hit the ground, he was at eye level with Ayanna. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was ready to move if he proved to be a threat. "I accept," Sam said quietly, "not because your law requires it, not because I'm afraid of insulting spirits." He glanced down at Nita, then back to Ayanna, "but because she deserves a family, because she was brave enough to survive, because—" his voice caught slightly, "because I lost my own family, my wife and son. Fever took them 2 years ago. I've been empty since. Maybe this isn't chance. Maybe I was meant to find her." Ayanna's face softened almost imperceptibly. The hardness around her eyes eased just a fraction. "You know loss." "Yes, ma'am, I do. My husband killed by soldiers," Ayanna said, her voice flat but heavy with old pain. 2 years ago, Salt River. They say he hostile. He was hunting rabbit for our family." She looked at Sam's cavalry jacket. "Maybe your people kill him." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. He felt the color drain from his face. "What unit? What regiment?" "Blue coats. That all I know." Sam's mind raced back through his memories, through the fog of battles and skirmishes that had defined his final years in the cavalry. Salt River, 1883. He had been there. His unit had engaged with what they were told was a war party, but he remembered the aftermath, remembered seeing the bodies, seeing the hunting tools, not weapons, seeing evidence that these had been men gathering food, not preparing for combat. It had been the final straw for him. He had refused to participate in the cover-up, had spoken out against his commanding officer's report. That insubordination had led to his dishonorable discharge, though they had quietly made it administrative to avoid scandal. "I was there," Sam said, his words barely above a whisper, "at Salt River. I didn't fire on your people. I refused. That's why they discharged me. But I didn't stop them either. I just watched. And for that, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The clearing had gone utterly silent. Even the children who had resumed playing at the edges of the village had stopped to watch. Ayanna stared at Sam, her face unreadable. The warriors had tensed again, hands tightening on weapons. Then, from behind Ayanna, an old man emerged from one of the larger wickiups. He walked with the careful dignity of advanced age, leaning on a staff carved with intricate symbols. His hair was white as snow, braided and wrapped with leather cords. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of survival and wisdom. This was clearly a person of importance, of authority. The old man spoke, his voice surprisingly strong despite his age. Ayanna immediately bowed her head slightly in respect. The warriors did the same. He approached slowly, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the situation. When he reached Ayanna's side, he said something in Apache. She responded, and Sam heard his name mentioned, heard Nita's name, heard words he could not understand, but which clearly summarized the situation. The old man listened occasionally, asking brief questions. Finally he turned to Sam and spoke in English, his accent less pronounced than Ayanna's. "I am Nantan, father of Ayanna, grandfather of Nita." His gaze was penetrating, seeming to look straight through Sam's skull into his thoughts. "You soldier, kill Apache before." It was not a question, and Sam would not insult this man with lies or evasion. "Yes, sir, I was. During the campaigns. I carry that shame every day." "Why you saved granddaughter?" Sam met the old man's eyes steadily. "Because she needed help. Because she was a child dying alone. Because I couldn't save my own son, but maybe I could save her." Nantan studied him for a long moment, and Sam felt as if he were being weighed on some cosmic scale, his soul measured against standards he could not fully comprehend. Then the old man nodded slowly. "You speak truth. Heart knows truth." He placed a hand on Nita's head, stroking her hair with gentle affection. "Child lives because you choose kindness over hate, choose life over death." He looked at Ayanna. "Daughter speak of Ilta. This is correct. He feed child, he become family." The warrior with the scar protested, speaking rapidly in Apache. Nantan cut him off with a sharp word and a gesture. The warrior fell silent, though his face showed clear disagreement. Nantan turned back to Sam. "You accept this bond." "I do," Sam said firmly. "You understand this not simple thank you. This mean you protect Nita as your own, protect Ayanna as sister, protect this family with your life if needed." The weight of it settled over Sam's shoulders like a physical burden, but it felt right somehow, like he was finally carrying something worth the effort. "I understand, and I accept." Nantan nodded once decisively. Then he said something in Apache that seemed to be directed at the entire village. The tension that had gripped the clearing began to ease, not vanishing entirely, but loosening. Some of the women began to drift back to their tasks. Children resumed playing, though they kept casting curious glances at the strange white man. Ayanna stepped closer to Sam. Up close he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the strength in her jaw, the intelligence in her gaze. "You will stay in village, learn our ways, prove your heart." It was not a request. Sam nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A ghost of a smile touched Ayanna's lips. "Do not call me ma'am. I am Ayanna. You are—" She paused, seeming to search for the right word. "You are Shyla. Now, brother." Nita, who had been watching this entire exchange with rapt attention, suddenly grabbed Sam's hand and began tugging him toward the village, chattering away in Apache. She was clearly trying to show him something to bring him into her world. Sam looked at Ayanna, uncertain. She nodded permission, and he allowed himself to be led by the small girl this child he had saved, and who had perhaps saved him in return. As they walked toward the wickiups, Sam felt the weight of many eyes upon him, suspicious eyes, curious eyes, hostile eyes. He was an outsider here, a representative of the people who had stolen Apache lands and killed Apache people. Trust would not come easily or quickly. But as Nita pulled him forward, her small hand warm in his, chattering away in her incomprehensible language, but clearly delighted to be showing him her home, Sam felt something he had not felt in 2 years. He felt like he might have a purpose again. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Cooking fires were being lit throughout the village, and the smell of roasting meat and baking bread began to fill the air. It was the smell of home, of community, of life continuing despite all hardships. Sam knew his decision to accept this bond would change everything. He knew there would be challenges ahead, dangers he could not yet predict. The men who had taken Nita were still out there somewhere, and they would not have given up their pursuit. There would be questions from the authorities, complications with the Indian Agency, potential conflicts with settlers who would not understand or approve of a white man living among the Apache. But as Nita led him past the central fire pit, past wickiups where families were gathering for the evening meal, past children who stopped to stare at him with wide eyes, Sam felt something settling into place inside himself. Not quite peace, but perhaps the foundation upon which peace might eventually be built. Ayanna walked behind them watching. She had not fully trusted him, yet he knew. The pain of losing her husband was too fresh, the betrayals of white men too numerous. But she had extended him a chance, had honored the sacred tradition of her people, and Sam was determined not to betray that trust. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nita finally released his hand and ran to join a group of children her age. They accepted her immediately, and soon she was laughing and playing, as if she had never been gone, as if she had not spent days terrified and alone in the desert. Children were resilient that way, Sam thought. They could bounce back from trauma with a speed and completeness that adults could only envy. He stood there in the growing darkness, a stranger in a strange land, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate him. But somewhere in the gathering night, he heard Nita's laughter, pure and joyful and alive. And for the first time since standing over 2 fresh graves in Silver Ridge, Samuel Bridger smiled. The first 3 days in the Apache village passed in a blur of new experiences and constant vigilance. Sam had been given a small wickiup on the eastern edge of the settlement, close enough to be watched, but far enough to keep him separate from the heart of the community. He understood the message. He was accepted provisionally on trial, his every action scrutinized by eyes that had learned not to trust easily. Each morning began before dawn. Sam would wake to the sounds of the village stirring to life, the soft murmur of voices, the crackle of fires being rekindled, the laughter of children already up and playing. He kept to himself, mostly performing small tasks around his wickiup, maintaining his gear, caring for Dusty. The horse had been given space in a communal corral, where the Apache kept their own horses, and Sam visited him daily, finding comfort in the familiar routine of grooming and feeding. Nita came to see him several times each day, always accompanied by her mother or another adult. The child seemed to have adopted him completely, chattering away in Apache as if he could understand every word. She brought him things: a smooth river stone she had found a feather from a hawk, a small woven basket she had made herself. These were gifts Sam understood, tokens of affection from a child who had no other way to express her gratitude. Ayanna came too, though less frequently. She was teaching him, he realized, though the lessons were subtle and often wordless. She showed him which plants were safe to eat and which were poisonous. She demonstrated how to prepare mesquite beans for grinding, how to identify the tracks of different animals, how to read the weather in the way clouds gathered over the mountains. Their conversations were brief and practical, never straying into personal territory. But Sam sensed her watching him, evaluating, searching for signs of deception or weakness. He tried to be worthy of that scrutiny to show through his actions the sincerity of his commitment. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Sam was collecting water from the creek when Red Skywalker approached. Red Skywalker stood on the opposite bank, the same man who had challenged him with a raised rifle on that first tense day. He was perhaps 32, broad-shouldered, and powerfully built with eyes that missed nothing. He had not spoken to Sam directly since that initial confrontation, though Sam often felt the weight of his hostile gaze. Now Red Sky stood on the opposite bank of the creek, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. "You fight?" he asked in heavily accented English. Sam straightened slowly, setting down his water skin. "I can fight. Don't want to unless I have to." Red Sky's lip curled slightly. "All white men say this, then they fight anyway." He gestured toward an open area near the creek. "Come, we see if you speak truth or lies." It was a challenge clearly, a test. Sam could refuse, but that would mark him as a coward in the eyes of the tribe. He could accept and win, which might breed resentment. Or he could accept and lose with dignity, showing respect for Apache strength. He chose the last option. "All right," Sam said, simply walking toward the clearing. Word spread quickly through the village. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. Men, women, children, all forming a loose circle around the open space. Sam saw Ayana arrive, her face tight with concern. Nantan was there too, leaning on his staff, his expression thoughtful. Red Sky removed his shirt and knife belt, setting them aside. Sam did the same, keeping only his pants and boots. They faced each other across 10 feet of dusty ground. "Apache wrestling," Red Sky said. "First man on ground loses." Sam nodded his understanding. They circled each other warily. Red Sky moved with the fluid grace of a natural fighter, his balance perfect, his muscles coiled and ready. Sam had learned hand-to-hand combat, and the cavalry had brawled in enough saloons and camps to know how to handle himself. But he was older now, slower, carrying the accumulated wear of hard years. Red Sky struck first, a lightning-fast grab for Sam's arm. Sam barely managed to twist away, feeling fingers brush his wrist. He countered with a low feint, trying to get inside Red Sky's guard, but the Apache warrior read the move and danced back. They grappled, broke apart, circled again. The crowd was silent, watching intently. Sam could feel sweat beginning to trickle down his spine despite the cool morning air. Red Sky came in hard, catching Sam's shoulder and using his momentum to try to throw him. Sam managed to hook his leg behind Red Sky's knee, turning the throw into a stalemate as they struggled for position. For a moment they were locked together, each straining against the other's strength. Then Red Sky shifted his weight expertly, using a technique Sam did not recognize, and suddenly Sam was airborne. He hit the ground hard on his back, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a painful whoosh. Red Sky stood over him, breathing hard but victorious. The crowd murmured, some in approval, some in what sounded like disappointment. Sam lay there for a moment, staring up at the morning sky, feeling the ache in his shoulders and back. Then he started to laugh. It was absurd, really. Here he was, a former cavalry soldier, flat on his back in the dirt, having just been soundly beaten by an Apache warrior, and somehow it felt right. He sat up, still chuckling, and extended his hand to Red Sky. The warrior looked at the offered hand with suspicion, then slowly reached down and grasped it, pulling Sam to his feet. "You fight with heart," Red Sky said grudgingly. "Not skill, but heart." He paused, and something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Heart enough. It was the closest thing to acceptance Sam had received from any of the warriors, and he recognized it as the gift it was. "Thank you for the lesson," Sam said sincerely. Red Sky nodded once, then walked away to reclaim his shirt. The crowd began to disperse, and Sam noticed that some of the looks directed his way were less hostile than before. Not friendly, not yet, but less hostile. Ayana approached as he was brushing dust from his pants. "You let him win," she said. It was not a question. I lost fair, Sam replied. You are soldier, trained fighter. You could have hurt him. Sam met her gaze. Maybe, maybe not. But even if I could have, why would I? This isn't about proving I'm stronger. It's about showing respect. Something shifted in Ayanna's expression. The guardedness eased slightly, and for the first time Sam saw approval in her eyes. Come, she said. Grandfather wishes to speak with you. When Sam followed her to Nantan's wickiup larger than most and decorated with symbols Sam did not recognize. Inside, the old man sat by a small fire tending a clay pot that released fragrant steam into the air. He gestured for Sam to sit. Ayanna settled beside her father, translating when needed, though Nantan's English was better than he initially let on. You learn our ways quickly, Nantan said, his weathered hands moving with practiced ease as he stirred whatever was cooking. This is good, but learning is not same as understanding. I know, sir, Sam said. I'm trying. Why you try? You could leave, go back to your people, live easier life. Sam considered the question carefully, because Nita deserves someone who will keep their promises, because Ayanna showed me mercy when she didn't have to, because... He paused, searching for the right words. Because I've been dead for 2 years, going through motions but not really living. Maybe here I can find a reason to live again. Nantan studied him with those sharp old eyes. You seek redemption. Maybe. Or maybe just a purpose. The old man nodded slowly. There is trouble coming. You feel this? Sam's instincts, honed by years of cavalry service, prickled to attention. What kind of trouble? The men who took Nita, Ayanna, said, her voice hard. They have not stopped searching. We have seen their tracks near our territory. They want her silenced. Sam felt cold fury settle in his gut. Why, what did she see? Nantan and Ayanna exchanged a glance. Then Ayanna spoke. 3 weeks ago, Nita wander from village. We tell her stay close, but she curious like all children. She go to creek beyond our boundary. There she see white men meeting, important white men with papers with gold. She saw them doing something illegal, Sam said, understanding dawning. She saw them sign papers, Ayanna continued. Papers about our land, about our water. She not understand all, but she hear names, hear them laugh about how Apache too stupid to know they being cheated. Who were they? One man she recognized from times he come to reservation with agent, big man with yellow hair and eyes like snake. He wear silver on his vest, ride black horse. Sam's blood ran cold. That description matched only one man he knew in this territory, Cole Harrington, former cavalry officer, now one of the wealthiest ranchers in Arizona. Sam had served with him briefly before Cole's tendency toward cruelty and corruption had become too obvious to ignore. They saw her watching, Ayanna said, her voice tight with controlled fury. They chase her, she run, but they catch her. They burn her hand with cigar, tell her if she speak, they kill her whole family. Then they put her in wagon plan to take her far away, maybe kill her later. But she escaped, Sam said. She small, but she brave. She wait until they sleep, then run. Run until she cannot run any more, then you find her. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Cole Harrington was trying to steal Apache land using forged documents and corrupt officials. Nita had witnessed the crime, and now Cole would stop at nothing to silence her. I need to get to Tombstone, Sam said abruptly. I know someone there who might help, a Marshal James Porter. He's honest, or at least he used to be. You think white law will help Apache? Ayanna's voice was bitter with old disappointments. No, Sam admitted. But I think honest men, regardless of color, can fight dishonest ones. If we can get proof of what Cole's doing, if we can bring it to the right authorities. This Cole Harrington powerful man, Nantan asked. Very powerful. Owns half of Silver Ridge, has connections in the territorial government. But he's not invincible. His weakness is his arrogance. He thinks he's too smart to get caught. Ayanna stood abruptly. Then we make him think this. We make him feel safe, while we gather proof to destroy him. Sam rose as well. I'll leave at first light, ride to Tombstone, talk to Porter, see what evidence we need. No, Ayanna said firmly. We go together. It's dangerous. If Cole's men see you, this is my daughter, my people. I go." Sam recognized the steel in her voice, the absolute determination. He nodded. "Then we go together." That evening, as preparations were made for the journey to Tombstone, Sam sat by his fire and cleaned his revolver. It had been 2 years since he had worn the weapon with any real purpose beyond basic protection. Now he was preparing for something more, for a conflict that could mean life or death, not just for himself, but for Nita, for Ayanna, for this entire community that had tentatively begun to accept him. Footsteps approached, and he looked up to see Nita standing at the edge of the firelight. She held something in her hands clutched close to her chest. "Nita," he said gently, "shouldn't you be asleep?" She did not understand his words, but she came closer and held out what she was carrying. It was a small leather pouch intricately decorated with beadwork. She pressed it into his hands, speaking rapidly in Apache, her small face serious. Sam held the pouch carefully, feeling something solid inside. He looked at Nita questioningly. She mimed eating, then pointed at the pouch, then at Sam. She was giving him food for his journey, he realized. A child's gift offered with all the solemnity of a sacred trust. "Thank you," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll keep it safe." Nita smiled then, that brilliant smile that transformed her face, and impulsively threw her arms around his neck in a quick hug. Then she was running back toward her wickiup, her small form disappearing into the darkness. Sam sat holding the pouch, feeling the weight of it in his hands, the weight of responsibility and purpose settling onto his shoulders. He had made a promise to this child, to her mother, to her people. He would keep that promise no matter what it cost him. The next morning, before the sun had fully cleared the eastern mountains, Sam and Ayanna prepared to leave. Red Sky approached as Sam was saddling Dusty. "I go with you," the warrior said. It was not a request. Sam glanced at Ayanna, who nodded slightly. "We'd be glad for the company," Sam said. Red Sky grunted acknowledgement and went to prepare his own horse. Nantan emerged from his wickiup to see them off. He placed a hand on Ayanna's head, speaking words of blessing in Apache. Then he turned to Sam. "You protect my daughter-grandson. Bring them both home safe." "I will," Sam promised. "And Samuel Bridger," Nantan said, using his full name for the first time. "You come back different man than you go. This I see. Question is what kind of different?" It was a question Sam could not answer, not yet. So he simply nodded, mounted Dusty, and turned the horse's head toward Tombstone. As they rode out of the village, Sam looked back once and saw Nita standing with a group of women waving. He raised his hand in return, a silent promise that he would return, that he would make things right. The sun climbed higher as they traveled, 3 riders moving across the harsh Arizona landscape with purpose. Behind them, the White Mountain Apache village continued its daily rhythms. Ahead of them, in the rough and lawless town of Tombstone, allies and enemies both waited, unaware that a reckoning was coming. Sam touched the small pouch Nita had given him, still tucked safely in his jacket pocket. He would not fail her. He could not. She had given him back something he thought he had lost forever. She had given him hope. And for that gift, he would fight. He would risk everything. Because some things he had learned were worth the cost. Some things were worth believing in again. The ride to Tombstone took most of the day. They traveled in silence for long stretches, each lost in their own thoughts. The only sounds the rhythmic clop of hooves on hard-packed earth, and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. The Arizona sun beat down with relentless intensity, turning the air into a furnace that baked the moisture from their skin. Sam found himself watching Ayanna as they rode. She sat her horse with natural grace, her spine straight, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon for threats. She had tied her long black hair back with a strip of leather, and she wore practical riding clothes rather than traditional dress. A rifle rested across her saddle, and Sam had no doubt she knew how to use it. Red Sky rode point his warrior's instincts, making him the natural choice for scout. Every so often he would raise his hand, signaling them to halt while he investigated something he had seen or heard. Each time Sam and Ayanna would wait in tense silence until Red Sky returned and gave the all clear. They were taking a risk, all three of them. An Apache woman and warrior riding into a white man's town, accompanied by a former cavalry soldier. It was the kind of situation that could turn violent with very little provocation. Tombstone had a reputation for being rough, even by frontier standards, a place where disputes were often settled with bullets rather than words. But they had no choice. If Cole Harrington was going to be stopped, they needed help from someone with legal authority, someone who could not be easily bought or intimidated. It was mid-afternoon when they finally saw Tombstone rising from the desert like a mirage. The town sprawled across the landscape in haphazard fashion, a collection of wooden buildings and canvas tents, saloons and boarding houses, shops and corrals. Even from a distance, Sam could hear the sounds of civilization hammers striking anvils, the tinny notes of a piano, voices raised in argument or laughter. "We should go in after dark," Red Sky said, reining his horse alongside Sam's. "Less eyes watching." "Agreed," Sam said. "We'll camp outside town, wait for nightfall. I'll go in first alone, find Marshal Porter, explain the situation. Once I know it's safe, I'll signal you to come in." Ayanna looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded reluctantly. "What signal?" "I'll light a lantern in the marshal's window. If you see that you can approach. If not, if I'm not back by midnight, ride back to the village and warn your father." They found a sheltered spot in a wash about a mile from town, hidden from casual view by a stand of Palo Verde trees. They made a cold camp, no fire that might give away their position. Sam shared the food Nita had given him, dried meat and corn cakes, and they ate in silence as the sun sank toward the western horizon. When full darkness had fallen and the stars were brilliant overhead, Sam mounted Dusty and prepared to ride into town. "Be careful," Ayanna said quietly. Sam met her eyes and saw genuine concern there. It surprised him, touched him more than he cared to admit. "Always am," he said, then urged Dusty forward into the night. Tombstone after dark was a different beast than by daylight. Lanterns and torches threw pools of yellow light into the streets, creating pockets of illumination separated by deep shadows. Music and laughter spilled from saloons, and the boardwalks were crowded with miners, cowboys, gamblers, and women in bright dresses calling out to passers-by. Sam kept to the edges of the main street, avoiding the most crowded areas. He had been to Tombstone before, knew the layout well enough to navigate without drawing too much attention. The marshal's office was on the north end of town, a sturdy adobe building with bars on the windows and a wooden sign hanging above the door. Sam dismounted and tied Dusty to the hitching post. Through the window, he could see a figure sitting at a desk, head bent over paperwork. He recognized the broad shoulders, the graying hair. James Porter Marshall of Tombstone, one of the few truly honest lawmen Sam had ever known. He pushed open the door and Porter looked up, his hand automatically moving toward the gun on his hip. Then recognition dawned on his weathered face and his eyes widened. "Sam Bridger," Porter said, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Thought you were dead or drunk in a ditch somewhere." "Neither," Sam said, closing the door behind him, "though I've been close to both." Porter leaned back in his chair, studying Sam with the careful attention of a man trained to read people. "You look different, cleaner maybe, less like a man who's given up." "I had help remembering what it's like to care about something." "That's so," Porter gestured to a chair. "Sit down. Tell me what brings you to my town in the middle of the night, looking like you're ready for war." Sam sat and began to talk. He told Porter everything, finding Nita by the river, learning about the sacred bond being accepted into the Apache village. He told him about what Nita had witnessed, about Cole Harrington, and the forged land documents about the kidnapping and the burn mark on a child's hand. Porter listened without interrupting, his face growing progressively grimmer as the story unfolded. When Sam finished, the marshal sat silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Cole Harrington's a powerful man, Sam. Half the merchants in this town owe him money. The other half owe him favors. You're talking about accusing him of fraud, kidnapping, assault on a child. I know what I'm talking about. The testimony of an Apache child won't hold up in court. You know that. They'll say she's lying or that she misunderstood what she saw. Then we get other evidence. Documentation. Witnesses who can't be dismissed so easily." Porter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street. "There's a judge in Phoenix, Harrison. He's straight as they come, hates corruption with a passion. If we could get the evidence to him, present a case he couldn't ignore. Can you contact him?" "I can send a telegram tomorrow. But Sam, even if Harrison agrees to investigate, we need solid proof. The forged documents themselves would be ideal, or testimony from someone involved, someone white, who saw what happened." "There's an Indian Affairs agent," Sam said. "Nita heard them mention him, man named Whitmore. He's in on it." Porter's expression darkened further. "Whitmore? Yeah, I know him. Slippery bastard. But if he's involved, that means federal jurisdiction. That actually helps us. Harrison can bring federal marshals in people who aren't beholden to local interests." A plan was beginning to form. Sam could see it in Porter's eyes, the wheels turning as the marshal calculated angles and possibilities. "How long can you stay in town?" Porter asked. "As long as it takes. But I didn't come alone." Porter raised an eyebrow. "Who's with you?" "Ayanna, Nita's mother, and an Apache warrior named Red Sky. They're camped outside town waiting for my signal." "Jesus, Sam, you brought an Apache woman into Tombstone. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? She insisted, and she has as much right to see justice done as anyone." Porter rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of exhaustion and frustration. All right, light the lantern in the window. Bring them here through the back entrance. We'll figure this out together." Sam stood and moved to the window, striking a match and lighting the oil lantern that sat on the sill. The flame caught and grew, throwing warm light out into the darkness. Somewhere out there he knew Ayanna and Red Sky were watching. They would see the signal and come. 20 minutes later, a soft knock came at the back door. Porter opened it, and Ayanna and Red Sky slipped inside like shadows. In the better light of the office, Sam could see the tension in their faces, the wariness of people entering hostile territory. Porter studied them both, his lawman's eyes taking in every detail. Then he nodded slowly. "Ma'am," he said to Ayanna, "I'm Marshal James Porter. Sam here tells me your daughter witnessed a crime. I want you to know I take that seriously, regardless of what she is or where she comes from." Ayanna's posture relaxed slightly. "You are honest, man. I try to be. Then we work together. Stop men who hurt my daughter. Stop men who steal from my people." "That's the plan," Porter agreed. He turned to Red Sky. "And you are Red Sky Walker. I protect her." The warrior's hand rested on the knife at his belt, making his meaning clear. Porter's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Fair enough. Can you fight?" "Yes." "Good. We might need that before this is over." They spent the next hour discussing strategy. Porter explained that they needed to move carefully, gather evidence without alerting Cole Harrington to the investigation. The forged documents were likely kept either at Cole's ranch or in the Indian Affairs office. Either location would be difficult to access without being noticed. "There's another option," Porter said thoughtfully. "Doc Henderson. He's treated injuries on Apache traders who've been beaten by Cole's men. He's kept records, dates, descriptions. It's not direct evidence of the land fraud, but it establishes a pattern of harassment and violence toward the Apache." "Will he testify?" Sam asked. "Maybe. He's a good man, but he's scared. Cole's threatened him before." "I'll talk to him," Sam said. "He knew my wife. Treated her during the fever. He might listen to me." It was decided. Sam would visit Doc Henderson in the morning. Porter would send the telegram to Judge Harrison in Phoenix, requesting his intervention. Ayanna and Red Sky would remain hidden in the marshal's office until they had a clearer sense of the situation. As the meeting broke up, Porter pulled Sam aside. "This is dangerous what you're doing. Cole Harrington doesn't just threaten. He kills. And if he finds out you're working against him, especially with Apache allies, he won't hesitate to put you in the ground." "I know," Sam said quietly. "So why risk it? You've spent 2 years avoiding any kind of commitment, any kind of connection. Why change now?" Sam thought of Nita's smile, of the way she had pressed that small beaded pouch into his hands with such trust. He thought of Ayanna teaching him to identify herbs, of Nantan's words about redemption and purpose. He thought of the moment by the Gila River when he had felt something crack open inside his chest, letting light into places that had been dark for too long. "Because I found something worth fighting for again," he said simply. Porter studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'd better make sure you survive to enjoy it." Sam left the marshal's office and walked back to where he had left Dusty. The streets were still busy, though the crowd had thinned somewhat as the night grew later. He was untying the reins when he heard his name called from across the street. "Bridger, Sam Bridger, is that really you?" Sam turned and felt his blood turn to ice. Standing in the doorway of the Silver Dollar Saloon, backlit by the yellow glow of lanterns, was Cole Harrington himself. Cole was tall and broad, with the build of a man who had stayed strong despite middle age. His hair was indeed yellow, as Nita had described, slicked back with pomade. He wore expensive clothes, tailored vest with silver buttons, black coat, polished boots. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, and his eyes, even from across the street, were cold as a snake's. "Cole," Sam said evenly, his hand drifting toward his revolver. Cole crossed the street with the confident stride of a man who owned the world. "Heard you'd left the territory. Figured you'd drunk yourself to death somewhere. Still here, still breathing." "So I see." Cole's gaze swept over Sam, assessing. "You look better than last time I saw you. Cleaner, more focused. Found yourself a purpose." The question was casual, but Sam heard the edge beneath it. Cole was fishing, trying to determine why Sam was in Tombstone, whether he posed any kind of threat. "Just passing through," Sam lied. "Thought I'd look up an old friend." "Porter, I assume, the righteous marshal." Cole's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "You two always did have a lot in common, both so concerned with doing the right thing, even when the right thing was foolish. Some of us still care about honor." "Honor," Cole repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it bitter. "Honor doesn't buy land, Sam. Honor doesn't secure water rights. Honor is a luxury for men who can afford to be poor. And theft, fraud." "What are those?" Cole's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful, Sam. You're making accusations you can't back up." "Am I?" They stood there in the middle of the street, two former comrades now facing each other with barely concealed hostility. Around them, the noise of the town continued, but Sam felt as if they were alone in a bubble of tension that could shatter at any moment into violence. Finally, Cole stepped back, his expression smoothing into something almost pleasant. "It's late. I'm sure you're tired from your journey. We should catch up properly tomorrow, perhaps. I'd love to hear what you've been doing with yourself." It was a threat disguised as an invitation. Cole was warning him, making it clear that Sam was being watched, that his presence in Tombstone had been noted. "Maybe," Sam said noncommittally. Cole tipped his hat in mock courtesy and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sam stood watching until he was out of sight, then mounted Dusty and rode quickly back toward the marshal's office. Cole mentioned he'd be heading back to his ranch the next morning, something about checking on his men. When he burst through the door, Porter looked up sharply. "We have a problem," Sam said. "Cole's in town. He saw me." Porter cursed under his breath. "Did he suspect anything?" "Hard to say. He was fishing, trying to figure out why I'm here. I played it casual, but he's not stupid. He'll be watching me now." Ayanna stood from where she had been sitting in the corner. "Then we move faster. We cannot wait for telegrams and judges. We act now." And do what? Porter challenged. Storm Cole's ranch, get ourselves killed. We need those documents, Sam said. The forged land deeds. Without them, we have nothing solid enough to bring Cole down. They're probably at his ranch, Porter said. Place is a fortress. Armed guards loyal men who won't hesitate to shoot trespassers. Then we don't go through the front door, Red Sky said quietly. He had been silent until now, observing, listening. We go like Apache, in darkness, in silence. Take what we need and vanish before they know we were there. Sam looked at the warrior with new respect. You've done this before. Many times, against cavalry camps, against supply wagons. Red Sky's scarred face was grim. Against enemies who thought they were safe. A plan began to form, desperate and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. They would wait one more day, let Cole think he had successfully intimidated Sam. Then tomorrow night they would raid Cole's ranch, find the documents, and disappear before anyone could stop them. It was risky. It was illegal, technically, breaking and entering. But as Sam looked at Ayana's determined face, thought of Nita waiting back at the village, he knew they had no other choice. Sometimes justice required more than laws and courts. Sometimes it required action. All right, Sam said. We do this tomorrow night, but we do it smart. We plan every detail, every contingency. One mistake, and we're all dead. Porter sighed heavily. I can't officially sanction this. You know that. If you're caught, I can't protect you. We know, Ayana said. But you will help anyway, because you are a good man. Porter looked at her, at Sam, at Red Sky. Then he nodded slowly. God help me, but yes, I'll help. Just try not to get killed, and don't get me fired in the process. Outside, the night deepened toward the darkest hours before dawn. In the shadows of Tombstone, plans were being made. Forces were gathering. And in a ranch house several miles outside town, Cole Harrington sat in his study, staring at a map of Apache lands, completely unaware that his carefully constructed schemes were about to come crashing down around him. The pieces were in motion now. The game had begun. And before it ended, someone was going to lose everything. The following day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sam spent the hours visiting Doc Henderson, a gray-haired physician who ran a small practice on the edge of Tombstone. The doctor remembered, Margaret remembered treating her during those final terrible days when the fever had burned through her body, despite every remedy he tried. That shared grief created a bond, and when Sam explained what he needed, Doc Henderson agreed to provide his records and testify if called upon. I've seen what Cole's men do to those Apache traders, Doc said, his hands shaking slightly as he pulled files from a cabinet. Broken bones, knife wounds, burns. And every time the victims are too afraid to press charges. I've kept these records for 2 years, hoping someone would finally have the courage to stand up to that bastard. Sam left the doctor's office with a leather satchel full of medical documentation. It was not the smoking gun they needed, but it was another piece of the puzzle, more evidence of Cole's pattern of violence and intimidation. He returned to the marshal's office through the back entrance, finding Ayana and Red Sky preparing for the night's raid. They had laid out their weapons and tools with military precision. Rope knives, dark cloth to wrap around anything that might reflect moonlight. Red Sky was sharpening his blade with long, practiced strokes. Porter got a response from Judge Harrison, Sam reported, setting down the satchel. He's coming to Tombstone, arriving in 3 days with federal marshals. But he needs solid evidence to justify arresting Cole. The medical records help, but we still need those land documents. Then tonight we get them, Ayana said. She had changed into dark clothing, her hair braided tightly against her head. She looked fierce, ready for battle. Porter spread a map across his desk. I've been asking around casual-like about Cole's ranch. Security is tight, but there are patterns. Guard changes at midnight. Dogs on the south side, but the north approach is clear if you're quiet. Cole's study is on the second floor east wing. That's where he'd keep important documents. How do we get inside? Sam asked. There's a servant's entrance on the north side. It's usually locked, but the lock is old. Red Sky, you think you can pick it? The Apache warrior examined the simple sketch Porter had drawn. Yes, easy. Once inside, you'll need to move fast, Porter continued. Cole has maybe a dozen men on the property at night. Most of them sleep in the bunkhouse, but there are at least 3 or 4 doing rounds. If you're spotted, forget the documents and run. Your lives are worth more than paper. Sam studied the map, committing every detail to memory. The layout, the guard positions, the escape routes. This was like planning a cavalry raid, except they were the raiders, now the ones sneaking into enemy territory. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple, they made their final preparations. Sam checked his revolver, ensuring every chamber was loaded. Ayanna tested the action on her rifle. Red Sky secured his knife and added a second blade to his belt. If something goes wrong, Sam said quietly to Porter, make sure Nita knows we tried. Make sure she knows her mother died protecting her people. Nothing's going to go wrong, Porter said, but his eyes betrayed his worry. You're coming back, all of you. They waited until full dark, until the streets of Tombstone had quieted and the saloons had expelled their last drunken patrons. Then they slipped out the back of the marshal's office and made their way to where they had hidden their horses. The ride to Cole's ranch took 40 minutes. They approached from the north, as Porter had suggested, moving slowly to avoid raising dust that might be visible in the moonlight. A quarter-mile from the main house, they dismounted and tied the horses in a dry wash where they would be hidden from casual view. From there, they moved on foot. Red Sky took point, his warrior's training making him nearly invisible in the darkness. Sam followed with Ayanna, bringing up the rear. They communicated entirely through hand signals, a language of gesture and meaning that transcended words. The ranch house loomed ahead, a large 2-story structure built of adobe and timber. Yellow light glowed in a few windows, but most of the building was dark. In the distance, they could see the bunkhouse smoke rising from its chimney, the murmur of voices barely audible across the night air. They circled to the north side, staying low, using every bit of cover the landscape provided. A tumbleweed rolled past, and they froze until it had passed, until they were certain no one had noticed the movement. The servants' entrance was exactly where Porter had indicated, a simple wooden door with an iron lock. Red Sky knelt before it, producing 2 thin pieces of metal from inside his shirt. He worked with patient precision, his ear pressed against the lock, listening for the click of tumblers. 5 minutes passed. 10. Sam's nerves were stretched taut as wire. Every sound seemed amplified in the darkness, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of the house settling, his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then Red Sky pulled back the lock mechanism, and the door swung open with a barely audible squeak. They were in. The interior was dark, but thin moonlight filtering through windows provided enough illumination to navigate. They found themselves in a narrow hallway that smelled of cooking grease and soap. The servants' area. Red Sky led them forward, moving with the fluid silence of a predator. They reached a staircase and began to climb, each step tested carefully before weight was committed. The old wood threatened to creak under their boots, but Red Sky had taught them to step on the edges where the boards were better supported. The second-floor hallway was carpeted, which helped muffle their footsteps. Sam counted doors as they passed. 1, 2, 3. Porter had said the study was the 4th door on the right. They reached it and paused. Sam pressed his ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. He tried the handle and found it locked, but this lock was even simpler than the one outside. Red Sky had it open in less than a minute. The study was exactly what Sam had expected from a man like Cole Harrington. Expensive furniture shelves lined with leather-bound books that had probably never been read, a massive oak desk dominating the center of the room. And everywhere, symbols of wealth and power, mounted animal heads, paintings in gilded frames, a liquor cabinet stocked with crystal decanters. Sam moved to the desk while Ayanna kept watch at the door, and Red Sky began searching the filing cabinets along the wall. The desk drawers were locked, but Sam had come prepared. He produced a small pry bar and worked it into the seam, applying careful pressure until the wood splintered and the drawer popped open. Inside he found exactly what they needed. Land deeds, dozens of them, all bearing official seals and signatures. But Sam's practiced eye could see the inconsistencies: ink that was slightly different shades, signatures that did not quite match known examples, dates that overlapped in impossible ways. These were forgeries, and not even particularly good ones. Cole had been counting on the fact that no one would look closely enough to notice. "Found them," Sam whispered. He was gathering the documents into a folder when he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy boots moving with purpose. Ayanna's hand shot up in warning. Sam froze, the documents clutched in his hands. Red Sky melted into the shadows behind the door, his knife appearing in his grip like magic. The footsteps stopped directly outside the study. A voice called out, gruff and suspicious. "Mr. Harrington! That you in there?" Sam's mind raced. They could try to hide, but if the guard opened the door, he would see them immediately. They could fight, but a gunshot would bring every man on the property running. They could try to bluff their way out, but what possible excuse could they give for being in Cole's study in the middle of the night? The door handle began to turn. Sam made his decision in a split second. He moved to the window and opened it as quietly as possible. It led to a sloped roof that extended over the front porch. "Go," he whispered urgently to Ayanna and Red Sky. "I'll distract him." "No," Ayanna hissed. "We go together. There's no time. Take the documents. Get them to Porter. That's what matters." The door was opening. Red Sky grabbed Ayanna's arm and pulled her toward the window, even as she resisted. Sam thrust the folder of documents into Red Sky's hands. "Protect her," he said. "Keep her safe." Then he stepped into the center of the room, into the moonlight streaming through the window, and let himself be seen. The guard was a burly man with a drooping mustache, carrying a shotgun. His eyes widened when he saw Sam standing there. "What the hell? You're that Bridger fella. What are you doing in Mr. Harrington's private study?" "Looking for something that belongs to the Apache," Sam said calmly, his hand resting on his revolver. Behind the guard, through the open door, Sam could see Ayanna and Red Sky disappearing through the window onto the roof. Good, they would make it. The documents would reach Porter. That was all that mattered. "Don't move," the guard said, raising the shotgun. "I'm calling Mr. Harrington. He's here." Sam felt his stomach drop. "In the house. Arrived an hour ago. You picked a bad night for burglary, mister." Footsteps thundered in the hallway, multiple men responding to the guard's shout. Sam knew his chances of escape had just dropped to nearly zero, but he had accomplished the mission. The others were safe. The evidence would reach the marshal. Cole Harrington himself appeared in the doorway, flanked by 4 armed men. He was in shirt sleeves, a cigar clamped between his teeth, and his eyes were cold with fury when he saw Sam. "Well, well," Cole said softly. "Sam Bridger, breaking into my home, stealing my property. I should kill you where you stand." "Those documents aren't your property," Sam said. "They're forgeries, evidence of fraud, and by tomorrow morning they'll be in the hands of a federal judge." Cole's expression flickered with something that might have been concern quickly hidden. "What documents? I don't see any documents." "Do you boys see any documents?" The guards murmured their denials. Sam realized his mistake too late. Without the physical evidence in his hands, it was his word against Cole's. And here on Cole's property, surrounded by Cole's men, his word meant nothing. "Looks to me like you broke into my house with intent to commit robbery." Cole continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "That's a hanging offense. Lucky for you, I'm feeling merciful. I'll just have my boys beat you to within an inch of your life and dump you in the desert. Maybe you'll make it back to town. Maybe you won't." "You won't get away with this," Sam said. "Porter knows I'm here. Judge Harrison is on his way from Phoenix. Your schemes are finished, Cole." "Porter's a marshal with no jurisdiction outside Tombstone. Harrison is 3 days away and has no evidence of any wrongdoing. And you," Cole smiled a predator's smile, "you're about to have a very unfortunate accident." He nodded to his men. They moved forward, weapons raised. Sam's hand dropped to his revolver, but before he could draw, one of the guards swung the butt of a rifle into his stomach. Air exploded from his lungs, and he doubled over, gasping. Another blow caught him across the back, driving him to his knees. They were going to kill him. Not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly, making him suffer for his defiance. A gunshot cracked through the night. Everyone froze. The shot had come from outside, from the direction of the front yard. Shouts erupted from the bunkhouse. More gunshots followed, a rapid staccato of rifle fire. Cole moved to the window and looked out, his face twisting with rage. Apache. There are Apache attacking the house. It was Red Sky, Sam realized. The warrior had not fled as ordered. He had circled back, creating a diversion to save Sam's life. The guards hesitated, torn between following Cole's orders to beat Sam and responding to the attack outside. In that moment of confusion, Sam acted. He drove his shoulder into the nearest guard's midsection, knocking him backward. His hand found his revolver, and he drew, firing twice at the ceiling. The gunshots in the enclosed space were deafening, creating chaos. Sam lunged for the window and threw himself through it. He hit the sloped roof hard, rolling, unable to control his descent. His fingers scrabbled for purchase on the wooden shingles, finding none. Then he was falling, tumbling through empty air for a heart-stopping moment before crashing into the bushes below. Pain exploded through his left shoulder, but adrenaline drove him to his feet. Bullets whined past his head as Cole's men fired from the windows above. Sam ran zigzagging across the yard, making himself a difficult target. Ahead he saw Ayanna, on horseback, leading Dusty by the reins. Red Sky was providing covering fire from behind a water trough, his rifle cracking methodically. "Move!" Ayanna shouted. Sam reached Dusty and vaulted into the saddle, despite the screaming protest from his injured shoulder. Red Sky fired 3 more shots, then sprinted for his own horse and swung aboard in one fluid motion. They rode hard into the darkness, pursued by the angry shouts of Cole's men and the crack of rifles. Bullets kicked up dust around their horses' hooves, but the darkness and their speed protected them. Within minutes, they had outdistanced their pursuers and were swallowed by the vast Arizona night. They rode for an hour before daring to slow down, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Cole's ranch. Finally, when Sam was certain they were not being followed, he called a halt in a small canyon where they could rest and regroup. "You came back," he said to Red Sky, his voice rough with emotion and pain. "I told you to run." "Apache do not leave brothers behind," Red Sky said simply. Ayanna dismounted and came to Sam's side, her hands already examining his shoulder with practiced efficiency. "You are hurt." "Just bruised. I'll live." Sam looked at her in the moonlight, saw the fear and relief warring in her eyes. "Did you get the documents to Porter?" "No. We have them here." She pulled the folder from her saddlebag. "We would not leave without you." Sam felt something break open inside his chest, something warm and profound. These people who had every reason to hate him, who owed him nothing, had risked their lives to save his. They had not abandoned him even when it would have been safer, easier, smarter to do so. They had chosen him. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "Both of you. Thank you." "We are family," Ayanna said, and it was the first time she had used that word without qualification or doubt. Family does not leave family behind. They made a cold camp in the canyon and waited for dawn. Sam sat with his back against a rock, cradling his injured shoulder, while Ayanna cleaned and bandaged a cut on his forehead he had not even realized he had received. "Tomorrow we take these to Porter," Sam said, gesturing to the documents. "Then we wait for Judge Harrison. With this evidence and Doc Henderson's testimony, we'll have enough to arrest Cole and Agent Whitmore." "And then?" Ayanna asked. "Then your people get their land back. The water rights are restored, and Nita will be safe." Ayanna was quiet for a moment, her fingers gentle as they worked. "And you? What happens to you?" Sam thought about that question. A month ago, he would have said he would drift away again, return to his solitary wandering. But now, sitting here with these people who had become his family, the thought of leaving felt wrong. "I stay," he said. "If you'll have me, I've found something here worth fighting for, worth living for." Ayanna's hands stilled. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Sam saw tears gleaming in her eyes. "We would be honored," she said softly. "Shyla." "Brother." The word wrapped around Sam's heart like a warm blanket, chasing away the cold emptiness that had lived there for so long. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Sam watched the horizon and thought of Nita waiting back at the village. He thought of Nantan's words about redemption and purpose. He thought of Margaret and Thomas, and for the first time in 2 years, the memory did not bring only pain. They would have wanted this for him, he realized. They would have wanted him to find a new family, a new purpose, a reason to keep living. The sun broke over the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. A new day was beginning, and for Samuel Bridger it felt like a new life. They rode into Tombstone just after sunrise, exhausted and battered, but carrying the documents that would bring down Cole Harrington's empire of corruption. The town was just waking up, shopkeepers opening their doors, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery. A few early risers stopped to stare at the unusual sight, 2 Apache riders and a white man, all looking like they had been through a war. Marshal Porter was waiting at his office, having spent the night pacing and worrying. When he saw them riding up the back alley, relief flooded his weathered face. "Thank God," he said as they dismounted. "When you didn't come back by midnight, I thought the worst." "It was close," Sam admitted, wincing as he climbed down from Dusty. His shoulder had stiffened during the ride, and every movement sent jolts of pain through his body. Inside the office, they spread the documents across Porter's desk. The marshal examined them carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each page he reviewed. "This is it," he said finally. "This is everything we need. Forged signatures, backdated deeds, transfer documents for land that was never legally available for purchase." Cole was planning to control every drop of water in a 100-mile radius. He looked up at Sam. "How did you get these?" "We broke into his ranch," Sam said bluntly. "So technically they might not be admissible in court." Porter's jaw tightened. "Damn it, Sam. You know better than that." "We had no choice. Cole would have destroyed them the moment he suspected an investigation." "He's right," Ayanna interjected. "Your law protects men like Harrington. We had to act outside law to find truth." Porter started to argue, then stopped himself. He knew she was right, even if it complicated matters legally. He sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. "All right, here's what we do. I'll telegraph Judge Harrison immediately, tell him we have critical evidence of federal crimes. With his authority, we can make this legitimate. In the meantime, you 3 need to lay low. Cole knows you were at his ranch. He's going to come looking for revenge." "Let him come," Red Sky said quietly. "We are ready." "No," Porter said firmly. "No more vigilante action. We do this by the book from here on out, or everything falls apart." A knock at the front door made everyone tense. Porter's hand moved to his gun as he called out, "Who is it?" "Doc Henderson." "Porter, let me in. It's important." Porter opened the door and the elderly physician hurried inside, his medical bag clutched in one hand and a telegram in the other. His face was flushed with excitement. "Judge Harrison sent a wire," Doc said, waving the telegram. "He's arriving today, not 3 days from now. Says he received urgent information about federal corruption, and he's coming with 2 U.S. Marshals." Sam and Porter exchanged glances. "Today? That's impossible. Phoenix is 2 days away by coach." "He chartered a special train," Doc explained. "Left last night. He'll be here by noon." The news changed everything. What they had expected to take days would now happen in hours. Porter immediately began preparing, sending a deputy to secure the courthouse, arranging for additional security, gathering every piece of evidence they had collected. "Doc, I need you to bring your medical records," Porter said. "Every case of violence against Apache traders, every suspicious injury, everything that shows a pattern." Doc nodded and hurried out. Porter turned to Sam and the others. This is going to move fast now. Harrison is not a patient man, and if he came this quickly, it means he's already convinced something serious is happening. We need to be ready to present our case the moment he arrives." The morning passed in a flurry of preparation. Sam drafted a written statement describing how he found Nita, what she had witnessed, and the events that followed. Ayanna provided a detailed account of the kidnapping and the years of harassment her people had endured from Cole's men. Red Sky, though less comfortable with written English, added his testimony about the raid on Cole's ranch and what they had found. At 11:30, the whistle of a train echoed across the desert. Tombstone did not have regular rail service, so the sound brought people into the streets curious about this unexpected arrival. Porter, Sam, Ayanna, and Red Sky made their way to the small station platform to meet Judge Harrison. The train that pulled in was a private car, sleek and expensive, clearly chartered for speed rather than comfort. The door opened and 3 men descended. Judge Harrison was exactly what Sam had imagined, a man in his 60s with steel gray hair, piercing blue eyes, and the ramrod straight posture of someone who had never bent to pressure or intimidation. He wore a black suit and carried himself with natural authority. The 2 U.S. Marshals flanking him were younger, hard-faced men with badges pinned to their vests and rifles in their hands. Harrison's gaze swept over the group, waiting for him, taking in every detail with the sharp attention of a man trained to assess situations quickly. "Marshal Porter," he said, his voice carrying the crisp accent of a New England education, "I received your telegrams. Federal fraud, kidnapping, assault on a minor. These are serious allegations." "Yes, sir," Porter said, "and we have the evidence to back them up." Harrison's eyes moved to Ayanna and Red Sky. "These are the Apache witnesses, Ayanna and Red Sky Walker, Your Honor," Porter said. "The child who was kidnapped is Ayanna's daughter." Harrison studied Ayanna for a long moment. "Ma'am, I want you to know that in my court, justice is blind to the color of a person's skin. If crimes were committed against you and your daughter, those responsible will be held accountable." Ayanna met his gaze steadily. "Then you are different from most white men in power." A ghost of a smile touched Harrison's lips. "I try to be." He turned to Porter. "Show me what you have." They adjourned to the courthouse, where Porter had set up everything in the judge's chambers. For the next 2 hours, Harrison reviewed every piece of evidence, the forged land documents, Doc Henderson's medical records, the written testimonies, even the small beaded pouch Nita had given Sam, which still bore traces of her blood from when Cole's men had burned her hand. Harrison asked pointed questions, challenged inconsistencies, demanded clarification on details. He was thorough to the point of being relentless, but Sam could see he was also fair. The judge was not interested in railroading anyone. He wanted the truth wherever it led. Finally, Harrison sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "This is damning," he said quietly. "If even half of this holds up under scrutiny, we're looking at multiple federal charges: fraud, corruption of a federal official, assault, kidnapping, conspiracy." He looked at the U.S. Marshals. "Gentlemen, I'm issuing arrest warrants for Cole Harrington and Indian Affairs Agent Whitmore. Bring them in." One of the marshals cleared his throat. "Sir Harrington's ranch is fortified. He has at least a dozen men loyal to him. This could turn into a shooting war." "Then we'll have a shooting war," Harrison said flatly. "But I'd prefer to avoid bloodshed if possible." He turned to Porter. "Marshal, do you have deputies you trust?" "3 good men, sir." "Get them. We'll go in force, make it clear that resistance is futile. Harrington is a businessman above all else. When he sees he's beaten, he'll fold." But Harrison had underestimated Cole Harrington's desperation. As the posse was being assembled, a commotion arose from the street. Sam looked out the window and felt his blood run cold. Cole Harrington was riding into town at the head of 20 armed men. They came in force, heavily armed, looking more like an invading army than a group of ranch hands. "He knows," Sam said. "Someone warned him." Harrison moved to the window and assessed the situation with a military man's eye. "We're outnumbered 2-1, and they have us pinned in the courthouse. This is not ideal." "We can fight," Red Sky said, already checking his weapons. No, Harrison said firmly. I won't have a massacre in the middle of town. Innocent people could be killed. He straightened his coat and moved toward the door. I'll go talk to him. Sir, that's not safe, one of the marshals protested. Nevertheless, it's what I'm going to do. I'm a federal judge. Harrington may be many things, but he's not stupid enough to kill a judge in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses. Harrison walked out of the courthouse and stood on the top step, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting. Cole Harrington dismounted and approached his men spreading out in a semicircle behind him. The entire town seemed to hold its breath, people peering from windows and doorways, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. Judge Harrison, I presume, Cole said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. I heard you were in town stirring up trouble based on lies and forged evidence. The only forged evidence I've seen bears your signature, Mr. Harrington, Harrison replied calmly. I have arrest warrants for you and Agent Whitmore on multiple federal charges. You can surrender peacefully, or you can resist and make things infinitely worse for yourself. Cole laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Arrest warrants based on what? The word of a drunken ex-soldier and some Indians. No court will convict me on such flimsy evidence. The evidence is far from flimsy. We have the original land deeds forged by your hand. We have medical documentation of violence committed by your men. We have eyewitness testimony from credible sources. And we have a frightened child with a burn mark on her hand that matches the cigars you smoke. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Cole's face. He had not expected them to have so much, to have built such a comprehensive case. His hand drifted toward the gun at his hip. I wouldn't, Harrison said quietly. You're surrounded by witnesses. Kill a federal judge and you'll hang within the week. Maybe, Cole said, but I'd take you and half this town with me first. The standoff stretched out, tension building like a thunderstorm about to break. Sam could see Cole's men getting nervous, their hands tightening on their weapons. One wrong move, one misplaced shot, and this would explode into carnage. Then from the crowd of onlookers, a voice called out, Mr. Harrington. Everyone turned. Agent Whitmore was pushing through the crowd, his face pale and slick with sweat. He was carrying a carpet bag, clearly having been in the process of fleeing when he heard about the confrontation. Whitmore, Cole said, his voice dangerous, where the hell do you think you're going? I'm done, Whitmore said, his voice shaking. I'm not hanging for your schemes. I'm turning myself in, cooperating with the judge. I'll testify to everything, the forged documents, the bribes, all of it. Cole's face went purple with rage. You coward! You spineless, sniveling coward! I'm a coward who wants to live, Whitmore shot back. He turned to Harrison. Your Honor, I'm willing to provide complete testimony in exchange for leniency. I have records, dates, names, everything you need to prove the entire conspiracy. Harrison's expression remained neutral. We'll discuss terms after you're in custody. Marshal Porter, take Mr. Whitmore into protective custody. Porter moved forward and took Whitmore by the arm, leading him toward the courthouse. Cole watched this betrayal with undisguised fury, his hand still hovering near his gun. You're finished, Harrington, Harrison said. Your partner has turned on you. Your crimes are documented. Surrender now, and at least you'll live to see trial. Sam watched Cole's face as the reality of his situation sank in. The rancher had built his empire on intimidation and corruption, on the assumption that he was too powerful, too connected to ever face consequences. But now, standing in the middle of Tombstone, with a federal judge staring him down and his co-conspirator turning state's evidence, Cole finally understood that his world was collapsing. His hand moved away from his gun. I want a lawyer, he said, his voice flat and defeated. The best damn lawyer money can buy. You're entitled to legal representation, Harrison said. Marshal Porter, take Mr. Harrington into custody. Porter approached cautiously, clearly expecting Cole to make a final desperate play. But the fight had gone out of the rancher. He allowed himself to be disarmed and cuffed without resistance. His men, seeing their boss surrender, began to disperse, unwilling to face federal charges for a leader who had already given up. Within minutes, it was over. Cole Harrington was in a cell. Agent Whitmore was singing like a canary in exchange for a reduced sentence, and the town of Tombstone was buzzing with the news that the most powerful man in the territory had fallen. Sam stood on the courthouse steps next to Ayanna, watching as the crowd slowly dispersed. He felt drained, exhausted beyond measure, but also lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "It's done," he said quietly. "Nita is safe. Your land is protected. Justice won." Ayanna looked at him, and he saw tears glistening in her dark eyes. "Thank you, Sheila, for keeping your promise, for fighting for us when no one else would." "I didn't do it alone." "No," she agreed. "You had family to help you." The word still sent a warm rush through Sam's chest. Family. He had a family again. 3 days later, a formal ceremony was held at the Apache village. Judge Harrison attended personally along with Marshal Porter and several territorial officials. In a historic moment, Harrison publicly returned all the stolen land deeds to Nanton, declaring the Apache's water and mineral rights permanently protected under federal law. The village celebrated with a feast that lasted until dawn. There was dancing and singing food prepared according to ancient traditions, and a sense of joy that Sam had never witnessed before among a people who had known so much loss and betrayal. Doc Henderson attended the celebration, his medical bag set aside for once as he shared stories with the Apache elders about healing practices. He had testified at Cole's trial, his records proving crucial to the conviction. Marshal Porter stood at the edge of the gathering, declining the feast, but accepting a cup of water from Ayanna. "You did good, Sam," he said quietly. "Damn good." He tipped his hat to Ayanna before riding back to Tombstone, a faint smile on his weathered face. As part of the celebration, Nanton performed a formal ceremony in front of the entire tribe. He called Sam forward and spoke in Apache, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Ayanna translated softly for those who did not understand the language. "My people," Nanton said, "we have faced many enemies. Many have tried to destroy us, to take what is ours, to break our spirit. But we survive because we are strong. We survive because we remember who we are. And sometimes we survive because we find allies in unexpected places." He placed his hands on Sam's shoulders. "This man came to us as a stranger. He could have ignored the suffering of one child. He could have turned away. But he chose kindness. He chose to act. And through that choice he saved not just one child, but an entire people." Nanton lifted a beautifully crafted leather vest, decorated with intricate beadwork and patterns that told stories Sam could not yet read. "We name you Sheila officially, brother of the Apache, protector of the people. From this day forward you are one of us. Your blood is our blood. Your fight is our fight. Your family is our family." He placed the vest on Sam's shoulders, and the weight of it felt like a mantle of responsibility and honor combined. Sam found he could not speak, his throat too tight with emotion. Nita ran forward and threw her arms around his waist, laughing with pure joy. Then Ayanna was there, and red sky, and suddenly Sam was surrounded by people embracing him, welcoming him, accepting him fully and without reservation. For the first time since Margaret and Thomas had died, Samuel Bridger felt whole. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Sam found himself sitting by the central fire with Ayanna. The others had drifted away to their wickiups, leaving them alone beneath a sky brilliant with stars. "What will you do now?" Ayanna asked. "Return to your ranch, your old life." Sam shook his head. "I sold that ranch 2 years ago, used the money to drink and drift. I have no life to return to." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I'd like to build a new one. Here, if you'll have me. I could help be useful. I know horses know how to hunt, how to fix things. And I could work with the Indian Affairs Office, make sure what happened with Whitmore never happens again." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "You would give up your people to live with mine." I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. A family that wants me. A purpose that matters. A place where I belong." She turned to look at him, her face illuminated by firelight. "It will not be easy. There are those in my tribe who will never fully trust a white man, and your people will not understand. They will call you traitor, Indian lover, worse things." "Let them," Sam said simply. "I've spent 2 years caring what people think, and it nearly destroyed me. Now I care about what's right, and this feels right." Ayanna smiled a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Then stay, Sheila. Help us build something new, a bridge between our peoples, so that maybe someday there can be understanding instead of war." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. In the distance, Sam could hear Nita's laughter as she played with the other children, and the sound filled him with a contentment he had forgotten was possible. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, conflicts between cultures, people who would try to tear down what they were building. But for the first time in years, Sam felt ready to face those challenges. He had a family now. He had a purpose. He had a reason to wake up each morning and try to make the world a little better. As the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Sam thought of the moment by the Gila River when he had found a dying child and made the choice to care. That single decision had led him here to this fire, to this family, to this new life. Sometimes he thought redemption comes not through grand gestures, but through small acts of kindness. Sometimes healing begins with simply choosing to help when it would be easier to walk away. And sometimes, when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself. The fire burned low, the village settled into sleep, and Samuel Bridger sat beneath the Arizona stars, finally at peace with who he had been, who he was, and who he was becoming. He was Sheila now, brother, protector, family, and that was enough. That was everything.